I'm on daddy duty, David, so I'm going to just be muted and camera off in the background as needed. But just so you guys know, we've got young ears listening in.
Well, that sounds fine. Maybe you can, while we get started, and we have a couple minutes now, but Austin, people haven't met Austin yet. He's a bicycle adventure person, and as you can tell, a new dad, and has done some work on thinking about long distance trails in the Ohio River Basin. So we wanted to welcome Austin to the crew and see how he might fit into the overall project.
Fantastic.
Really looking forward to learning more this afternoon.
Well, we'll be 1 minute late. We'll start at 4:01, and we have 12 folks online. We'll start with you, Austin. One of the things we do is a roll call and to see who's online, and what we want you to do is just introduce yourself, and but not too long because we have a big agenda.
Sure.
And if everybody else could type their name into the chat, that'd be great, and who they're representing, and we'll just go through. And one interesting thing about the Ohio River or recreation, Austin, go ahead.
Good deal. Pleasure to meet everyone. My name is Austin Render. This is my son, Jack Render, and we live in Jeffersonville, Indiana, just a couple blocks off of the river. My background really is mainly in cycling. Done a lot of self-supported touring through Asia and South America, and guiding for a few years kind of all over the world. I have brought that love back to Kentucky, which is where I grew up, and started a 3-day bike and bourbon tour called the Bourbon Country Burn, based out of Lexington, Kentucky. So I've been in the bike travel and tourism industry for about the last decade or so, and I'm looking forward to learning more about this project and opportunities to promote cycling throughout the Ohio River Basin.
All right, we're just going to go on down. Perry, you're up next. Who are you, Perry, and one thing about the river?
Perry Thomas, and in my virtual background today is the Kentucky River.
All right, Richard Harrison.
Richard Harrison with Orsenko, and really just trying to maximize the opportunities with the Ohio River and our organization, which works on water pollution control for the river. I think there's a great synergy there.
Billy Bennett.
Billy Bennett, Kentucky Environmental Education Council, and very interested in the intersection between environmental education and recreation.
Bridget Taylor.
Hi, I'm Bridget Taylor. I'm an environmental scientist at Orsenko. I do water quality sampling and monitoring.
And the GIS guru. How
Yeah.
about Jack Sutton?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Jack Sutton. I'm one of the 3 co-chairs for the Ohio River Recreation Trail. Retired from Great Parks of Hamilton County, served as their executive director for over 17 years. And one thing about the Ohio River, this time of year, you can see further. So if you're on a ridgetop and you have a view of the river, without the leaves, you get to see a lot more. So winter's a great time along the river.
All right, is Russ Barnett still on?
Yeah, Russ Burnett. I live in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and have about 45 years of working in the environmental field. And as of about 3 hours ago, in an earlier Zoom call, I finished up a 25-year career at the University of Louisville.
You did a good job with it. Let's see, Heather Mayfield.
Congratulations, Russ.
Well, thank you.
My name is Heather Mayfield. I'm director of the Foundation for Ohio River Education, or FOR. We are a nonprofit supporting educational foundation of Orsenko. I'm also leading the Knowledge to Informed Decisions work group. So I'm trying to participate in these meetings as much as I can, since there's a lot of crossover between our group and recreation group.
So true. Brad, you're on.
Yeah, hi, I'm Brad Collett. I'm an associate professor in the University of Tennessee School of Landscape Architecture, and I'm the director of the Tennessee Riverline Partnership.
Thank you. And Trish.
Hi, Trish Allison from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the Ohio starts. Paddle enthusiast. And one thing I really love about the river, all rivers really, but the Ohio in particular, I think, is how diverse it is, from some really big cities, some not, some really remote areas, places where it's really wide and not so wide, and just all of that diversity and the challenges that presents.
Thank you, Trish. And Mark Young, why would we just quickly introduce yourself? We're going to do a bigger one on you later.
Mark Young, Louisville, Kentucky, and I see a lot of potential for outdoor recreation, outdoor education, and environmental education, as well as cycling opportunities and paddling on the Ohio River. A lot of work to do, though.
Thank you. And last but not least is Risa. And Risa she has the first agenda item on here, which is talking about our vision. So who are you, Risa? And take it away with the vision statement.
Okay, Risa Shimoda. I'm in Tacoma Park, Maryland, a little bit outside of the Ohio Basin, but I learned to row my kayak in Hamilton County High School up there. So I have some Buckeye in me, and happy to be helping with this. I'm leading the digital guide committee also, and for those who are on our meeting, I will send notes, and our next calendar invitation, I owe that to us. But I offered to help us put together a vision for our part of this big, larger effort, and if I can figure out how to do this. A number of you shared with me your vision, your perception of what our vision could be. And I tried to take a look at all of those. And so there were a bunch of them. You might see yours here. So half a dozen or so shared their suggested visions for recreation, for our recreation group. And I have David suggested it could be a vision in progress or a working vision. But I was trying to use best practices for being specific, being succinct. Everybody here has probably worked on 1,000 vision statements. But my suggested one, at least to start with, is by 2025, our basin-wide welcome will be nationwide known as a regional destination for enjoying the solitude of headwater creeks, the excitement of scenic rivers and streams, myriad of wildlife explored by tributaries, and cultural history. So I clearly need an editor here. But one thing that I didn't see in the suggestions were that the importance of developing a sense that everyone in the basin is part of this larger basin. For having spent time in I've lived in Kentucky and Ohio and Tennessee and the Carolinas, and there are parts of the Ohio Basin that don't know that they're in the Ohio Basin. So that's sort of in there. Plus, I tried to incorporate many of the ideas that were suggested in others' vision. I don't know how to post this or have this be available for comment, David, but it definitely needs a little bit more thought, and welcome comments. It's in the folder, so I can show you where it is. And if you have if you're looking at that and you see something that looks particularly awful or appealing, please put it in the chat and we can, incorporate that. It's a little scary to edit as a group, as you also probably
Let's not try.
Right. So anyway, if there's something that strikes you about this good, better, and different, please share, and then maybe we'll refine it and put his stamp on it next time. And David also asked me while I'm here, can I do this, David? Go through the folders?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. So I set this up before the last meeting, and it's just an effort to try to organize us. I understand that, I appreciate that not everyone may be able to easily access Google Drive folders. It's been banned by some agencies. It doesn't get past other firewalls, but at least it's a place where someone in the different groups, we have the different 7 different working groups, can stash their stuff. So there's one for the overall working group, and just, you know, there's nothing in it except for this vision statement. So for things that we might want to collectively share, and let's see, I'm going to go to Perry's folder, the greenways and blueways folder, just to show that each of these, and everyone here should be able to edit them. If you can't, let me know, because I didn't do the permissions correctly. But in each one, there are 4 folders set up, and I sort of randomly just gave them all the same set of names. So one for images, which would be for photos or videos, one for meetings if you want to have meeting notes there, one for reports if there's something that the group is working on, and then one for resources. And I'll just open this one because I know Perry or David loaded a whole bunch of these. So this is the water trails folder, and there's a bunch of state plans and some, you know, preliminary things. So if you're the head of a committee, you can, if you're the River Towns committee, say, you know, feel free to add folders, get rid of folders, rename the folders. It doesn't matter, whatever works for you. But this is just a resource. If you have something for your group and you don't know where to stick it, at least for now, this could be a place for that. And like I said, if you, David provided a link to this in the agenda. So you should be, if you click the link, you should see this exact same thing. And if you can't get into it, then let me know and try to work on that. And I'm done.
Well, if you could share your screen, thank you very much, Risa. Just to let everybody know, the 6 other working groups are going to use a similar format. And so this is just an encouragement to use it, because as we produce a final document, having lots of photographs and lots of background data just makes it easier to work on. And so if any questions, certainly email or get in contact with Risa. For folks who don't know, you know, she is executive director of the River Management Society, which works nationwide. I'm a member, and I would highly recommend that people consider joining. Fascinating webinars, and last week I participated in a discussion around funding that was just fascinating, and how Oregon does it and how Kansas does it, and just a neat deal. So thank you very much, Risa. And once again, if anybody has any comments and likes to be a wordsmither, certainly feel free to do that. We'll post it in our minutes. As I've said earlier on, one of the things that I hope to do with this committee is to learn ourselves and to become more knowledgeable about the basin and also some of the other opportunities. I've asked Mark Young, who is interested. He participated last month just a little bit, and he, you know, Mark is very, very active nationally, as well as locally in land conservation issues. He's has parks and public policy consultant, a place called Parks Forever Consultant. He's president of the foundation of the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration, and was actively involved in the passing of these 2 recent federal legislations. And so I've asked Paul Mark to talk a little bit about Land and Water Conservation Act, as well as the American Outdoors Act. So Paul? Or Mark? Mark, sorry.
Well, that's great. Thanks, David. Just thanks for the invitation. And if none of you have heard, there was some historic legislation that was passed in August of this year, August 4th to be exact. It's signed into law. It's called the Great American Outdoors Act. And it's historic legislation because it does a couple of things, and I'll kind of explain the details of that. It provides more funding for conservation and outdoor recreation, particularly to states and localities than any other time in history. So the Great American Outdoors Act also includes the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act. And the Land and Water Conservation Fund has been around since 1965 when it was enacted by Congress. It provides funding for the federal government, for the federal land agencies, their land acquisition program, and also for state and localities, local governments, through the state and local assistance program. So it's divided up in those kind of two buckets, and there's some other programs involved in it as well. So I guess, so we've got that. Just to get back to the Great American Outdoors Act and what it funded with the National Park Service and the other federal land management agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, and a couple of others, Bureau of Land Management. So they have been experiencing the federal land agencies, and particularly I think the National Park Service, a maintenance deficit. They've got deferred maintenance, a lot of deteriorating facilities, roads and trails and other things within the park system, the National Park System. So this legislation, the Great American Outdoors Act, is providing $1.9 billion a year for the next 5 years, specifically earmarked for that deferred maintenance. So that's a huge deal. With 70%, I think, of that total funding going to the National Park Service. So we've got that. Then back to the Land and Water Conservation Fund Act. This is historic legislation this year because for the first time ever since it was enacted in 1965, the Land and Water Conservation Fund has been fully, permanently, and with dedicated funding. Never has reached that level of commitment. And what that means is that this is for state and local governments, that earlier than this August passage of the Great American Outdoors Act, there was another big piece of legislation that permanently authorized the Land and Water Conservation Fund. That means that it doesn't expire. It just goes on ad infinitum, and which is a good thing. So you don't have to worry about it expiring and reauthorize it in Congress. It's expired a number of times. So it pulls, it slows down the funding and so forth. It's also, so that's permanently funded. So it's also fully funded at $900 million a year and in grant funds, grant money. And it's dedicated funding because it provides, as in the past, where the Land and Water, where the trust fund, the so-called trust fund for Land and Water Conservation Fund has been kind of rated for other programs non-related to conservation and outdoor recreation. Now, with this legislation, it is mandatory funding. So instead of going through the Congressional Appropriations Act process every year, without further appropriations or other limitations, it is automatically funded. $900 million goes into that that fund, into that account. And just briefly, the money comes from offshore, primarily from offshore gas and oil leases, the royalties. So anyway, long story short, there's predictability, there's increased funding, and it's good times ahead, I think, for conservation and outdoor recreation through this landmark bill. I guess I'll stop there and see if there's any questions, because I know we want to kind of drill down to the what can it do for the Ohio River. But any questions on what I've said, or any of you that have dealt with it? Maybe Jack has something to add to that.
Well, Mark, good overview. It's a striking moment in conservation that we finally see permanent funding in land and water conservation funds. So my experience in Hamilton County, Ohio, there were many projects happen because of that land and water conservation fund over the last 30, 40 years. I've begun to do a little research here in Indiana, and talking to the folks at IDNR, it will probably double the allocation for the state of Indiana. Now, they'll have to decide how to allocate that between state park or state properties and local projects, but that's a big win. So for Indiana, it'll go from some $4 million to close to $9 million per year starting next year. So lots of opportunity for local projects up and down the Ohio River.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, on that point about the increased funding and predictable is also the result of a 40% set aside for the state assistance program for state and local governments. And it never has been guaranteed. It's been underfunded, the state and local side, for years. Now, 40% of the total land and water conservation fund goes to state and local governments, and that matches the 40% that is set aside for federal land holding agencies. So that's, like Jack said, it's going to significantly increase the amount of money available. The grants go for can be used for land acquisition. They can be used for park development, trail development, can be used for, of course, planning, rehabilitation, all that, for outdoor recreation facilities. So it's got a pretty wide range of uses under the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The grants are 50% reimbursement grants. So in other words, every project requires a state or local government, whoever gets the project, to reimburse, to match with 50%. So there's a lot of skin in the game for the state and local governments as well. I think that I wanted to mention too that that eligibility, there's also eligibility for these grant funds for recreation, parks and recreation commissions, and or park authorities like the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority and others across the country, where they've maybe have multi-jurisdictional organizations, and they operate under one authority with all these entities involved. And so they are also eligible for Land and Water Conservation Fund grants. I guess to get down to, I think really what we want to talk about, and I don't have all the answers on this, but I think what can this project do to be eligible for these funds, and to kind of get us in a better position to to apply and possibly receive LWCF grants. And one of the, I think, and I'm going to need some feedback on this, is that get back to the commissions or authorities or a conservancy district, some entity that's been statutorily established or constitutionally established to enable a locality to form these authorities, and so these multi-jurisdictional authorities. And I think that's probably one of the things that is one of the things I think that we need to consider here, looking at that. I don't know what we have in place actually that would align with that or fill that bill. Then the other part of it too is that with all of the towns, river towns and along the river, that we could be in a position to help them get grants and Land and Water Conservation Fund grants specifically to make improvements that would be to the overall improvement of the stretch of the Ohio River that we're working with. So let me stop there and see if there's any questions. I know there should be because I've left a lot out.
You know, I'm fascinated with the both. Could these funds support a multi-jurisdictional river trail? But also, how could we enhance the synergism of towns working together? And is that a benefit for these funds? That if it's a multi-state initiative or a multi-jurisdiction initiative, do they get extra credit? And how can we really help them with that? And so I think these are great considerations for our crew here to work on this. And any thoughts from anybody?
Well, let me jump in again. My experience, both in Ohio and a little bit more here in Indiana, is that these are federal funds, but they are passed through the state. So, for example, ODNR would be managing those funds in Ohio. Indiana DNR would manage those funds in Indiana, and I think likewise across the country. So it's imperative for local communities to understand sort of the guidelines and rules within their state and how those are set up. So for example, here in Indiana, you would be eligible to apply if you are a municipal park or recreation agency and you have an adopted parks master plan on file with IDNR, because they're concerned about what they call conversion. They don't want a community applying for funds and then basically 5-10 years from now no longer maintaining that as a public asset. So there are some bureaucratic steps that everyone needs to understand is involved. So probably part of that is help educating our river towns about who their contact is in the state and get them to better understand that individual states' guidelines or requirements.
Well, that's a good point, Jack. And to that point, the conservation, the LWCF Act itself, and the Department of the Interior through the National Park Service oversees it, have a section in the law called Section 6F that forbids any conversions. It has to remain with outdoor recreation access in perpetuity, forever. And it takes, it's a big deal to try to get those properties converted to anything else. It's happened, unfortunately, but it's not all that common. The other thing I think is about the Department of Natural Resources. The states administer it once the grants come down, and the grants to the states are, and this formula hasn't changed, it's 60% of the total LWCF state assistance funds, state and local assistance funds, go to all of the states equally. And then the remaining 40% is distributed based on primarily on population. So and every state kind of administers their LWCF funds differently. Jack mentioned the master plan. That's required, a 5-year master plan at least. And plus, there is the SCORP, which I know is part of our process here, has to be updated, and I think every 5 years as well. So that prioritizes your projects, and then so the state, whether it's the Kentucky local government, that's who administers it here in Kentucky, or ODNR or Indiana Department of Natural Resources. I think the state could keep any amount of it they wanted, actually, if they had a huge project that was a big priority. And they did that in Ohio with the Bass Island State Park. When they acquired a lot of land, it was a $6 million grant. That's way high. But so, you know, every state does it differently. Typically, I think probably the majority of the funding in each state of the total funding goes to these, probably goes to the local governments, and the state keeping, you know, maybe 40, 45% of it. But that varies from year to year and so forth. So,
Mark, I'll cut it off and move on if that's okay. Here's our challenge as I see it, is yes, we are about promoting this wonderful opportunity for land conservation and recreational promotion. In part, our job is to visualize the future of how can we, you know, is there something we want to recommend that could make it easier for coalitions of states or for watershed basins or for more coordination with that in that. So how do we react to promoting what's there, but what's the next step? How can we really take full advantage of it?
I think we just need to explore the, you know, what the guidelines are and what we can do and how we might go about it. I mean, if you're setting up a statutory, you know, a conservancy district or a parks and recreation water authority, whatever you're doing, that's quite a long process. Sure. Can be. I don't know, there may be other ways to work around that. I'll look into that. I did want to mention one other thing real quickly, David.
We're running out of time, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, hey, David, in terms of action, one thing we could do is prepare a memo that would go out to all the local elected officials, all the park district directors, recreation commission, whatever within the watershed that we're dealing with, and basically have us deliver to them the most easy to read, easy to understand, authoritative document about what the fund is, why it's a big deal, and what it means to them, and what they can do timeline and process-wise to apply and hopefully get funding.
Could you work with Mark and Jack to produce that? Thank you.
Before we go too far down that road, may I point out David's suggestion in the chat? David, do you want to articulate that? That's an interesting one.
Well, does the synergism of working together sort of help this? But and so how do we, you know, is it possible to build a coalition of each of the states to have to build a plan? You know, so it's. I'm not sure what you want me to say, Perry.
A couple David's going here.
Oh.
David Wicks, that's a good overarching view, and then David Rudder might have some details to fill in.
I was just, as we were talking about that in each state managing their own funds, would it be possible to kind of get all of those state agencies, those folks together in a room or a Zoom meeting to really build a coalition where they are working from a unified vision for what to happen across the basin and across the length of the Ohio River, and then work towards implementing that. So that was my thought.
That would connect with the initial thinking from the Funding River Trails Committee. I see Risa's thumbs up because we have recognized what Mark and Jack are emphasizing that each state has their own approach to developing river trails, and each community within each state. And so if we could develop a vision across the states for that process, that would be one step.
I think that's kind of critical. Otherwise, it's every state for itself, and everybody's going at a little bit different way. Not maybe, and it might be a little confusing.
Perry, are you going to work with this then, with Brewster's idea and pulling together the folks? Is this one of your committee jobs?
I think Brewster's suggestion is broader. So I just wanted to put that out there in terms of what the Funding Trails Committee is thinking about doing. And then Brewster, maybe repeat what you said, and we'll think about how that relates to what our committee is working on.
Thank you very much, Mark. A fascinating discussion. I think there's lots more to do here. I want to move on. We have next item here, number 5. Mr. Harry Stone is meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers Leadership Committees for the Ohio River Basin in first week of December. He asked each working group to identify any issues that could be brought up to the Army Corps of Engineers leadership team. I, over the past minutes, made a couple of suggestions, and that's what was attached to the agenda. We have a couple minutes, and sort of the bottom line is if somebody has a specific ask or question about the Army Corps, this is certainly one time. We're going to provide all that information to Harry Stone, and he'll massage it into some discussion points. So I wanted to see if anybody had any other items, or if there's objections to any of the items that I gleaned from previous meetings.
David, I'll be on that call as well, or that meeting, so I could be happy to help get these points across. Do we have a good understanding of how the Corps is involved in from allowing their projects to be utilized for recreation within the basin?
Well, all I know is that there is a requirement that 10% of funds from any Corps project can be spent on recreational planning, at least in the ecological restoration piece. It still can be, it's not has to be, but I haven't gotten any data on how much has actually been spent in these ecological restoration pieces.
So as we develop this plan for recreation for the basin, since the Corps is located throughout the basin, perhaps a component of the plan could be providing information on the recreational opportunities provided throughout the basin for the Corps project. So that might be a way to get them engaged.
If anybody has any specific ideas or wording that you'd like me to put in there, please certainly send it to me. I'm going to get this document to Harry again by November 30th. That's next Monday.
David, would you resend the document you're referring to?
Sure, it was at page 2 of the agenda. So the one of the many emails I sent that had the agenda attached to it is the second page of that, but I'll resend it to everybody. We want to move along. We have, the work of this committee or this working group is really done by committees, and we have, looks like Wes Barnett on first with Greenways, and what we want to hear is just what you're doing and any thoughts and any concerns that we might be able to help as an overall group.
The committee hasn't met to date. About half of you on this call are on that committee. And so we will try to organize here, hopefully at least once, that we'll meet before the end of the year. And we'll do that, but we're mainly going to have to try to figure out exactly how we interrelate with all the other committees. So there's a lot of overlap in these committees, and so we got to figure out what exactly our role is. So we'll be looking at all the other committees of exactly where they're focused, and we'll then devise our own plan of attack then.
Sounds great, Russ, and I would not worry too much, at least initially, in any overlap. You know, our project is to develop recommendations and how they fit together, and as we move along, we can see where they fit. Jerry James is not online. Is anybody with the River Towns Committee? And I see we're missing a second person also, Russ Clark, with the Water Related Recreation Directory Committee. Now, there has been a little bit of work, and is Bridget still online here? Bridget talked about, you know, one of the pieces that they've done with the Water Related Recreation Directory is Russ has pulled together all of the water trails that he knows of in our region, and Bridget is maybe making a GIS layer so we can sort of look at the Go ahead, Bridget.
Yeah, I started going through all the river trails and with a layer, like, so exporting out which ones from all the rivers are water trails. So I finished Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, and still working on Tennessee. So it should be done soon. But then we can, like, so spatially look at where all the designated water trails are throughout the basin.
And we're still looking for updates for West Virginia, and I think eastern or western Pennsylvania, the water trails that flow into the Ohio River through Pennsylvania. So I don't know if Trish, you know of, we have to update Russ's map or Russ's file. You're on mute, Trish.
Yeah. In looking at the Pennsylvania SCORP, there's they actually used for the 20 to 24 plan, they actually used GIS data to map access and look at equitability of access across the state of Pennsylvania. But they have a land and water trail network strategy plan that is an appendix to their SCORP. So a piece of that is the water trail. So I'll see if I can extrapolate or what I can extrapolate to send or to include in Russ's thing that are the water trails. And then I don't know how far east the basin goes. You know, how much of Pennsylvania is really considered in the basin.
Well, that's probably pretty easy to figure out. It's rivers that flow west. But that's one project.
In Pennsylvania, they don't necessarily flow west, so the Allegheny is mostly south.
Oh.
And the Monongahela is north.
Those are both, and it goes into, Allegheny goes a little bit into New York State, so all the way up to the corner if you're looking at the whole basin.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the Monongahela with the Youghiogheny feeding into it, that extends all the way down into Maryland. And so it's a significant portion of Pennsylvania that's flowing into the Ohio.
Yeah.
I'd say about a third.
Well, Bridget, thank you very much. And that's one reason why we all need to become geographically more literate, including me.
I was trying to hold this up so everyone could see it, but it's a book that I just recently purchased because I was looking at doing some paddling trips into Pennsylvania. So
nice.
You know, and one of the goals eventually that Bridget is doing is, this is water trails, and do we eventually add in long distance bicycle trails? and some other nature-based activities. Just it depends. This fits into one of the goals and sort of is our next piece of digital guide to rivers, and how can we have a GIS common database across the basin. And so David Rudder, you're now, and we say chair, it's really convener. There is no, just to let everybody know on this call, these folks have volunteered to help coordinate a time to meet. They aren't in charge, but they just volunteered to help pull people together. So David, any reports on digital guide work?
So, well, my report on this is that Risa has actually been the one that's convening this. So she has made the effort to get us all together, and we did meet last week. And I'm going to let Risa speak if she's got a report for that.
Yeah, well, we did, almost everybody, all of us met. It was awesome. And I think what we realized that different databases for our rivers or water trails are all slightly different. So if you try to, they don't have all the same attributes. So what we decided, we talked about a number of different databases that exist, and kind of came to this like dead airspace place in the conversation, like what do we do now? Because none of them do fit, and many of them they're all awesome, of course. But what we decided was to look at the Ohio River Water Trail, Ohio River Recreation Water Trail, or whatever, Brewster, whatever you call it.
Ohio River Recreation Trail.
Yeah, Ohio River Recreation Trail. I knew I wasn't saying it correctly, but start there and use that and build that out instead of trying to, combine to try to enmesh attributes or to try to combine databases right now. So there might be another way to do it, but there are, like, the Riverlines project is its own, beautiful entity, and my organization has rivers down to almost to the bottom of the basin, and we worked with the TVA to get that data. So there are so many people have been involved in the different databases. We might make our approach a little more complicated at some point, but for now we're going to look at what's on the Ohio River, and then build out tributaries there, add information to that database. At least.
And I think one of the things I recall us also saying was that, for example, for the Tennessee River, instead of us ourselves trying to build that out, it's already there with what Brad's operation has. So we would have a link that would go directly to what is already there, developed by Brad's operation. So we're not trying to recreate anything, but we would have the main stem be what we would build out. But then the tributaries, to the extent they already have a GIS-based digital platform, we would link directly to them, which would be the most efficient and quick way to make this happen. That was my recollection of our conversation. Is that right?
Yes, and then I added something that's kind of like a wrench in the works, but I don't want to. It's not like a stopper right now, but I think an important aspect if you're providing a guide. If we have a guide on the Ohio River, and you say, oh well, for the whole Tennessee River, you go to this link. Well, on our link, we show where the bathrooms are, and you go to the other link that doesn't say anything about bathrooms, so you're disappointed. No, that's just one element. So they need to sort of be one part of a shopping experience if we're going to just link different databases. So that's where it gets complicated. But to start with, we're going to start with Ohio.
Well, Juan, thank you very much for the report. And it sounds like you are engaged. And once again, think long-term. What's our, not only what do we do today, but what's our long-term vision? Perry Thomas with Funding Water Trails.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, several of us have met to organize the committee. Risa, Jerry, and I met in person, and we got input from others. Our initial projects are twofold. One is to document river trail success stories across the basin, and then compare approaches across the states. And that's why I pointed out David Rudder's comment in the chat, because that fits right in with what we were thinking with that strategy. And I've pasted David Rudder's comment into our ongoing document and our committee's folder, so thank you. And then our second approach is to conduct and compile reviews of those SCORPs, the state comprehensive outdoor recreation plans. But as Risa pointed out, the approaches to recreation don't necessarily translate into river trail funding and development. So we're needing to do some sleuthing there. We're particularly looking at how states conduct their programming and funding. And we're hoping to identify the main state contact for each plan. I wanted to thank Billy and Trish for helping us with those reviews.
Well, why, thank you very much, Perry. Seth is not here with us for paddle sport and fishing, hunting education. He's working with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife as well as 2 other wildlife agencies. We have Billy Bennett, public outreach to support outdoor recreation.
Yes, and we have not met yet, but we do have a meeting scheduled on December the 1st to just a short organizational meeting so we can look at our goals and try to come up with a organizational plan to build this out.
Well, I'm next up here with the vacant federal and state lock houses and grounds. We have not met as a committee yet either, even though there are several projects underway. Vanceburg is interested in working with their lock house, and maybe that could be a demonstration project of what could be on. Then Carrollton, which is both on the Ohio and the Kentucky, has a lock house on the Kentucky River. Even though it's not a U.S. Army Corps piece, it is really a Kentucky River Authority piece. But they're interested in the future of that facility there. Right now, it's a vacant lock building. I have reached out to the Corps a couple times and have been unsuccessful in getting specific content where it says collaborate with the Army Corps to identify this. And I haven't found that person yet to collaborate with. So if anybody has any suggestions, I've made my reach outs and everything else. That's our committee. I did pass around, I did email a video, which I was going to have, it's item number 7 here, virtual preview of the river, of the exhibit. And unfortunately, we don't have time. We're a little bit shy on time, but I wanted to give time for people to talk, and you could watch it on your own. It's a wonderful video about a project we're doing here in Louisville, an artistic approach to understanding rivers. And I think you'll enjoy that video. We had a very good discussion this morning around it with several of the communities, and I thought it just went well. I wanted to sort of end with a sort of a time about next meeting. Our next Tuesday time is in the middle of Christmas, and I'm going to say let's not have a meeting in December. And our next meeting is January 26th. But by then, I hope every committee can really start to gel a little bit and think about those outlines that Harry sent, and I'll send them to everybody again. And he sort of had that output that he wants from this to be in some sort of consistent manner. So as you're meeting, start to review that output form that Harry has created. You know, I also, as you get to know, I send too many emails, but I've also spent some time doing some research on different projects around in the Ohio River Basin, and I just want to share one, and let's see if I can get it here. And it looks like a core study core draft study, 2006 Ohio River mainstream study. And I'll put the link in the chat right there. But it's about a 300-page document that the Army Corps of Engineers did in 2006. And it's a fascinating look at recreation in the Ohio River Basin. And to go through it, it's probably 60 pages focused just on recreation, you know, and then there's a whole bunch on ecological restoration and on and on and on. But the piece is that they have had quite a number of recreational surveys. This is called the, you know, the which I just found fascinating. And then they also did a very in-depth deal of recreational boating accidents and analyzed the entire basin and made percentages of how it's been, how recreation has changed from the early this guy here, 1995, but it goes back farther, like into maybe 1920, their analysis starts. And so I'll share this document, but I bring it up to say that I haven't spent a lot of time in large river management or in recreational management over a large area. And if people know of other documents, this is an ideal thing to put inside our review piece. And I'll send this link, and I think you'll find it interesting. I wanted to see if there was any other comments. I did put on here about efficiency of these meetings, and we want to make them efficient and effective. I also wanted to see if somebody wanted to volunteer for January to give a informational piece about their work. And I could always volunteer people, which I'm good at, but you know, I'd like to learn more about other people's work and how it relates to us. So maybe we could just sort of go around the group here and see if anybody has any final thoughts and any suggestions for making this process more efficient. We're going to start off with Billy. Any thoughts, Billy?
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure I was not muted. No, I think, you know, I'll have a better handle on it once we have this meeting with a public outreach group and see where we can, how we're going to organize and get things set up.
All right. Richard Harrison, any final thoughts?
Other than my dog is not happy with somebody at the front door. I like your thoughts, David, about just looking at the end product and what we need to get there. So I think over the next couple of months, just having some discussions of what we want the final chapters to look like.
All right. Mark, any other final comments? I want to just thank you very much.
Good meeting. I've got some other federal legislation that I'll send along at a later date for water trails, possibly, and make that available.
Sounds good. Brad, you were quiet. Any thoughts about our work?
No, I just wanted to thank Mark for the input here on the legislation. I think that's really one of the great strengths of what we're doing here is, you know, what can we do and what can we leverage together that none of us can do by ourselves. And I think that taking advantage of these types of legislative and funding opportunities is really one of the maybe greatest opportunities that we have. And so I thank you for that. I put in the chat here that we have our Tennessee Riverline Summit coming up at the end of January. It'll be a lot of programming and reporting out from the Riverline, but also in our river towns. So I'll send additional information to folks if you're interested in doing that. It'll be a completely virtual meeting. But you know, I'd be happy to share out some of the work that we're doing. David, perhaps after we get past the summit, I'll be busy in January preparing for that. But you can put me down for February, March.
You're on for February. Sounds great. So January's still open. Austin, any thoughts?
Well, I mainly wanted to just kind of be in the background on this call and learn more about the initiative here. Incredibly insightful and informational, especially the information that Mark shared earlier. It definitely has my wheels turning about some ideas for, as we've kind of touched on before, David, just creating some bike routes throughout the Ohio River Basin. I look forward to learning more about the scope of that, especially since we're looking at 15 states and what is it, 204,000 miles, square miles. But yeah, this is all exciting, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So thank you for involving me.
Austin? Very closely with the adventure cycling crew that has several national long trails that are just fascinating. How about Brewster Roads?
Good meeting, David, and I really appreciate, Mark, you sharing with us your most recent update. And I think that we obviously have a change in administration, which I think opens up new doors for us and opportunities, I think, to have Republicans and Democrats alike at the Senate and House level collaborate around major funding initiatives. There could be package of stimulus as COVID response. We'll see, but I think it's a new day. And I think we need to be really attentive to what the opportunities are that will exist in the coming months that did not exist in the past 4 years for funding some of these initiatives. So let's really think about how to collaborate around that throughout the basin.
Heather, any comments, Heather?
Sorry, I couldn't get myself unmuted there. Actually, Brewster just pointed out what I was going to mention too, that hopefully the change in administration will provide some new opportunities. But in general, no, I mean, I'm here too to kind of study how you have your committee structure set up and how you guys all work together to report on the work that you're doing. And I'm learning a lot that I think I can implement with my work group. So thank you for the opportunity to participate. I appreciate it. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Austin, one quick thing that I wanted to just ask you. Have you utilized the Ohio River Recreation Trail digital guide?
A little bit.
Okay.
And there was some conversation from the meeting this morning, drawing a blank on who presented on that, but I'd like to connect on anyone that's involved with that and kind of talk about user friendliness from a cycling perspective. I think it's something that's really great for paddling. I think there are, anyways, some critiques for coming from a cyclist. I'd like to connect on that another time.
That was me, so you can connect with me.
Oh, it was. I'm sorry. I was someone else. Sorry.
Yeah, good meeting, David. Good meeting to everybody. I think the one point you raised about how do we keep this focused at the basin-wide altitude is going to be a challenge. Maybe those statewide score plans are something to lean on a little bit to look at it in a macro view, but a lot of work ahead. And I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Perry.
Yes, I'd also like to wish everyone a good Thanksgiving and many thanks to Mark for joining us today and providing that great background. And may I suggest for January that we present our review of the SCORPs and what we've learned from them.
You're on for January. Sounds great. Risa. You're on mute, Risa.
Oh, no. Thank you, Mark, for all the good information and everybody. I think it is really important to invest what we can to get the states or water trail systems together so that we can begin to seed this idea that all these different heretofore disparate rivers, tributaries, or whatever are really part of it, because no one's thinking about that except these 12 people. So for recreation, so I would be happy to. I don't know who they are. I don't know who. Maybe it's the contacts from the SCORPs. Maybe that's a start. But to get that group together, just to at least tell them that they are part of the basin, whether they think they are or not, and we want us to be a group. Even if they're not working on this plan that much, to just kind of loop them in. Develop like a secret handshake. Everyone has the same secret handshake. There's Ohio or the same or something. We all wear the same underwear. So I don't know what it is, but something that binds the groups because as we go along, everything else will be a little bit easier.
Thank you very much. I agree. Russell Barnett.
Yeah, this is, I'm going on past 3 hours of Zoom calls today, so I think I've heard everything I could have possibly said. Just for those of you that are on the blue Greenways and Blue Trail group, you should have an email from me asking you of what days work best for you. If you just let me know what days. A few people have already responded, and they just kind of said it's this time period and these days work best, and then we can meet here in the next sometime early in December. Thank you.
Trish.
Yeah, kind of going on what Risa said, but not the people, disparate people, but also information. As I've looked into the SCORP and followed different links that are in it and things like that, and just some of the research I've done on my own, there's so much opportunity for recreation, but trying to figure out where to get the information, how to get the information, if it's there, if it looks the same. Part of what Risa was saying about the different guides and things too, it's hurts your head to look at all the information, but trying to pull it all together and recognize that it is all part of a basin, and if there's a way we can connect it and make it easier for anybody in this whole basin to access the information, I think that will increase the usage.
I wish to thank everybody for their time. We're about 5 minutes over. I just wanted to also acknowledge that Trish and a group of us in Louisville are in a competition that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has created the new Ohio River Kayak Challenge. And the challenge is to go to every single one of their 22 islands from Pittsburgh on down to Manchester. And about 10 of us from Louisville drove on up to Manchester, did our first two. We're working on the southern end and working our way up to Pittsburgh. And Trish, you went paddling this past week and started on the upstream end.
Yes, we did the two closest to Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago, 8 of us. And I think we're gonna maybe Friday or Saturday head out and hit 2 more.
Well, unfortunately, the people in Louisville are afraid of cold weather. And so you guys might win this challenge of who is going to be the first to visit every island for the Ohio River Kayak Challenge. You know, that's a fascinating deal that we might want to think about basin-wide. Is there something like that? Because here, U.S. Fish and Wildlife's putting money into it. They've made, you know, signage and boat ramps and access points for every island. It's a good thing. So we might win, though. You know, not too competitive. We just need to have some more non-fair weather paddlers, you know, but that's my life. You know, I think we're a southern town that thinks it should be 78 degrees all the time.
Yeah, if the sun's out up here, it's a nice day, so temperature's not really the factor. Temperature's not the factor.
Get to work. We have another 8 weeks till our next meeting, and look forward to it. Thank you very much.
All right, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.